So, yesterday it was the third round of the 2021 Formula One season. We raced at Portimao in Portugal, and Lewis Hamilton took his second victory out of 3 races this season. It wasn't exactly a scintillating race, nowhere near as good as the likes of Bahrain and Imola, in my opinion. Did you enjoy watching it, Dylan?
I feel it was still quite an exciting race, still quite a bit of action happening. It was mainly at the start with Kimi Räikkönen on lap 2 and Antonio Giovinazzi.
Yeah, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen came together. I think Raikkonen basically just drove into the back of his teammate. I think he got distracted by something on his steering wheel. 2 buttons, less buttons, more buttons. I don't know. If you put a driver in a car 30 years ago, it could be a trained monkey, according to Niki Lauda. Not now, though, because he'd probably just drive into the back of his teammate. But Red Bull came into Portimao hoping to come away leading at least the drivers with Max Verstappen. Mercedes are leading the constructors by quite a long way now, and they were at the start of the start of the weekend as well. But Max Verstappen was within 1 point of Lewis Hamilton, and now he is within 7, I think. Not all in all a bad result for Verstappen. I think that's about the same sort of gap that they had coming into Imola. So it's still all to play for him. We've still certainly got, by the looks of it so far, a bit of a title fight on our hands. But I think Mercedes were definitely the leaders when it came to pace in the race. In qualifying was an interesting one. Verstappen would have been faster, but he exceeded track limits. But in the race, they just dominated, really. I mean, Verstappen got Hamilton, but then Hamilton swooped past him, then Bottas, and then he just flew off into the lead. I don't know by how much he won, because Verstappen and
seconds.
Yeah, Verstappen and Bottas pitted again to try and get fastest lap, but he had it was a dominant win. It was Hamilton doing what Hamilton does, just going there, getting the win, going home. I'll see you next week. And next week we are racing in Spain. Is that right, Dylan?
Yes, the weekend coming up is
the first doubleheader. Doubleheader of the season. And but first we need to compare our predictions in qualifying with what actually happened in real life. In qualifying, Valtteri Bottas got pole, Lewis Hamilton got second, and Max Verstappen came third. He would have got pole, but obviously, I said earlier, track limits infringement at turn 4, I think. I predicted Max Verstappen would get pole, Hamilton would get second, and Sergio Perez would come third. 1 out of 3 there for me. Pretty average. I'm not very good at predicting this. Dylan, what did you predict?
Don't worry, I did awfully. I got none, as I predicted Hamilton, Verstappen, Perez, and as you can see, it's Bottas, Hamilton, Verstappen. So I got 2 people. 2 people were there, but in the wrong positions. So I got nothing.
Yeah, neither of us did very well. We don't usually do very well. We always try and go either too safe or too unsafe, and it's always the opposite, pretty much. And this time it was pretty much a standard top 3. I think those guys have shared the podium in the race about 15 times. It's almost routine. Oh, F1 podium, yep, Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas in whatever order. Usually Hamilton's won. And in the race, obviously Lewis Hamilton took the win, and Max Verstappen came second, followed by Valtteri Bottas, the pole sitter, who fell all the way down to third. I predicted Max Verstappen would get the win, and he would be followed by Sergio Perez to complete a Red Bull 1-2, with Lando Norris for McLaren in third. That was all wrong. Norris came 5th, Perez came 4th. They both had very strong races, respectively, but not on the podium. So 0 out of 3 for me. Dylan, what did you get?
I predicted Hamilton, Perez, Bottas, and I got 2 of them right. I was a bit too ambitious with Perez getting second, but I'm still happy with getting 2 out of 3, as I would have beaten you overall this weekend with predictions.
Yeah, that's what normally happens, isn't it? You usually win in when it comes to predicting things. Anyway, back to our main talking points for this weekend. As I said, Mercedes lead both championships, and Perez and Norris, as I kind of mentioned there in the predictions, they are both looking strong. Norris has thoroughly beaten Ricciardo. He won't be happy about that. Ricciardo had a shocking qualifying. He was out in Q1, beaten by the likes of George Russell and Williams, who nearly got through to Q3. Mr. Saturday really proving that he is indeed Mr. Saturday. Perez and Norris have both done well. Norris got a podium in Imola, and Perez has had some consistent results apart from Imola. He had a very good fight back in Bahrain, and he gave a solid P4 and led most of the race. or he led some of the race, sorry, before his team pitted him after he did an absolutely massive first stint, didn't he? It was about 50 laps, wasn't it, Dylan?
Yeah,
On
it
the
was
mediums as well.
very long. Yeah, I don't know how they managed to last that long. So I'm not surprised they brought him in. So I was looking, he was in first, Perez, so I got excited that he would possibly win the race, but then I saw they hadn't pitted yet. So
Yeah.
I was annoyed, so I really wanted him to win.
Yeah, everyone kind of got excited about that. Not Verstappen, Hamilton, sorry, was a bit confused. He said, shouldn't there be blue flags for Perez? No, Hamilton, he's actually leading the race. It just shows the pace of the Mercedes over the last years. They really don't expect Red Bull, especially either Red Bull, to be leading, the second Red Bull especially. And Norris has been doing well as well. He came fifth, behind Perez. And they're both doing well against their teammates. Perez, obviously, can't compare to Verstappen because Verstappen's Verstappen. He's very settled at Red Bull, but I think he's done enough to earn his seat. I think he's proven that he is deserving of that. Would you agree with me, Dylan?
Yeah, I think he has definitely showed to Christian that he is worthy of staying in the seat for hopefully next year. Not going to get kicked out too early, hopefully. So I think he definitely will be able to do some things. I think he might be able to get maybe one win this year would be nice, and a few more podiums would hopefully come later in the year.
Yeah, he's been a bit unlucky in the first couple of races, but yeah, I could certainly see a podium and maybe a win if something goes a bit wrong for Verstappen, or if he just has a good weekend. You know, we saw him in qualifying in Imola, he got on the front row, so I think he could be definitely in with the shot of taking the win. And Norris has, as I said, thoroughly beaten Ricciardo, and he's still sitting third in the championship. He did this last year. I don't think he'll get it just because the Mercedes, even though Bottas is questionably whether he should deserve that Mercedes seat, it's just a better car, and you can't account for it not being a good car. He can just stick it on pole a lot more easily than Norris can. And this is another thing, something that I put in, and I thought this is probably an interesting debate. I didn't really enjoy the Grand Prix. I mean, it was a good Grand Prix, but it was nowhere near as good as the first two. I think we were a bit spoilt with the first two. They're very good indeed. But is Portimao actually that good for racing? Because last year it was unique. We had a wet, dry race at the start. It started raining. Everyone was caught out. And that was when it kind of all went... Well, it all went wrong for the top teams. And it was quite interesting for the first few laps. But after that, things kind of settled down. But we didn't really have a sort of a time where it was all chaotic. It just started sunny and it finished sunny. There was a bit of wind. But the DRS zone on the front straight has been shortened by about 200 metres, so it made overtaking a lot more difficult. And the one on the back straight was so short that I didn't think it was worth it. And I like this track, I really do, to drive it, but for overtaking, there aren't that many heavy braking zones. So as much as I think Portimao is a good track, especially for qualifying, without like special conditions like the rain or something, Dylan, do you think it's actually that good a track for racing?
I think at times it can be interesting. Like, I think the first sector is quite good for racing, as there's quite a few braking zones and people can descend it down the inside. Otherwise, after that, you're just sitting behind the other car, waiting for the start-finish straight to get DRS and just fly past them. So it's not really... People aren't having to put as much effort in to try and get an overtake done, so they just wait for the start-finish straight to get it done, where there's most space, and you got DRS to help you get pulled along the track.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and especially as that DRS zone's been shortened, I think the overtaking was made a bit more difficult, so I think maybe lengthen that a bit next time, FAA. Make use of that long straight, as after all, there aren't actually that many overtaking spots on this track as a whole, apart from down in that first sector. And finally, we're going to talk about the Haas and the second half of the field. Haas have had a bad season ever since 2019, really. They've had bad seasons for nearly half of their time in Formula 1. And Mazepin was Mazepin yesterday. The gap to his teammate, he finished minutes behind his teammate. He didn't have any failures or something. He was just slow. And he got a 5-second time penalty for blocking Perez. And Mick looked good yesterday, didn't he, Dylan? He overtook Latifi. So I know we said this before, but do you think, even with the money, they can justify having Mazepin in that seat?
Well, I think the team would take the money because they want to keep it in the sport, keep the team in the sport. But I don't know It's a tough one, so I would probably go for a better driver. So then you'll be earning more money if you have a better driver, because of bonuses when you, depending on how high you're on the constructors. So I think Mazepin should go, although his dad owns part of the team, so you can't really do anything about that.
Yeah, and he did try to buy Force India to get Mazepin a seat back in 2018, so he certainly wants his son to have a seat, but he's just not a good driver, Mazepin. I mean, we saw that. He had the opportunity to show his pace in Portimao from the back, at least challenge Mick, even if he didn't overtake him, just, finish within 5 seconds of him. But that was a minute. Hamilton got a dominant win, and that was half the time, so I just don't think it's justifiable, really. And I think that even with the money that his dad's bringing to the team, is it worth having Mazepin in there? In my opinion, no. Yes, there's a lot of money, but as Dylan said, Constructors' Championship bonuses are important too, and it brings publicity to the team having a good driver, which in turn brings more sponsors. But that brings us to the end of our predictions, our race reports on the Portuguese Grand Prix. First doubleheader of this 23 race season starts this week. We have the Spanish Grand Prix next week, a track that looks roughly similar, doesn't it, to this track, Dylan? And
yeah, not much exciting.
No, it's not going to be exciting. I was going to say that. Don't get your hopes up for a brilliant Grand Prix, then. The Spanish Grand Prix never is very good. But for now, I've been Ed.
And I've been Dylan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.